Hello, everyone. This is Martin Willis, your host, and we have a live special show this week. It's early, a couple days early on a Sunday. Thank you for being here. We have Jason Sands, and we have, this is Darcy something. Oh, Darcy Weir. Yeah, I'm sorry, I've been teasing him a lot. But thank you so much for being here, and this is going to be a very interesting show. There's been a little bit of friction between these two, and they're going to talk a little bit about it, and also, we're going to find out the background on, Jason's going to tell a little bit about his story, and we're getting ready to go here in just a second. The blog this week is a 1981 report on an Ohio family besieged by UFOs, hairy humanoids, and black forms. That's a long title. But I'm very happy to be here in California. It's been a great event, and now I'm bringing in our two guests. Welcome, guys. Is anyone talking? Yes. Yeah. All right.
Can you hear us?
So I know you two have had, there's a little bit of a online friction that has been out there. And there's, of course, the X and Twitter has been, how this UFO community is kind of like battling against each other. It often happens. But I guess I'm going to start out, Jason, since it's the first time you've been on this show. If you can just kind of in a nutshell go on, I've watched you on different programs, but I mean just to go into kind of a nutshell what your experience has been.
Yes, it's been a phenomenon that's been around my life since childhood, but it really blossomed when I got into the Air Force, and I actually served in the program where they reverse engineer technologies, exotic technologies, for about 3 years in the middle part of my career. Then had a few other sightings and or UAP sightings and encounters after that, both in the remainder of my career and then afterwards. So in a nutshell, it's been something that's followed me around my whole life, but it kind of, reached a pinnacle during my career in the Air Force.
So I always thought when someone says that they got involved in something, I want to, just understand more. How were you chosen to do and get involved in the reverse engineering?
Well, there was no paperwork involved other than after they had already asked me, and I'd been through my polygraph. But I got on station around, I think it was 1991, was when they asked me to come on board. I had been there doing my work as an analyst, telecommunications analyst, monitoring telephones for the government. To try to look for security leaks and things like this for a number of years. And then I ended up at Nellis doing the same job, and I guess they liked what they saw. And I got approached by some of the people in the program. They said, we'd like to onboard you. Do you have a problem with getting polygraphed? And I said, no, I've got nothing to hide. So we went ahead, I passed my polygraph. Next thing I know, I was flying into Dreamland. And it was a really cool 3 years.
So do they, ahead of all this, do they like really heighten your security clearance and all that? How does that work?
It goes above Q clearances. So it's a special access program. And in this particular case, it's in what's called an OSAP, or unacknowledged wavered special access program. So there's a couple of categories of special access programs that go just special access, and then there's unacknowledged special access, and then there's the wavered unacknowledged access. And that's what I was in.
And what type of restrictions were you given as far as talking about, like what you're talking about now?
It was a 30-year cone of silence for the whole thing, so I've already served all that time out. I guess every 10 years they have enough breakthroughs in the reverse engineering program where what I knew in the 1990s atrophies, and they don't have a concern for, coming out other than just, unless you have a fraud, waste, and abuse problem, which is kind of what I had to report later on, is because I did see some things and hear some things that I felt I needed to talk to Congress about later on in life.
And so, Darcy, how did you, get involved in this story, and what were, the things you actually started questioning in your mind about what was going on?
Yeah, I respect you, and we've gotten to know each other a little bit since we got here. My major sort of gripe when Jason first came forward was kind of hastily confirming that he was in a program that was 20 and back like. At the time, which was last year, 2024, I jumped into a Twitter space, and I was deeply immersed in editing this docu-series called Dark Alliance about Corey Goode, David Wilcock, the whole Gaia fiasco with these guys, and how that story really fell apart in a legal deposition that was a court battle between Leon Isaac Kennedy, Hollywood actor, and Corey Goode. Corey ended up saying that he never physically went to space, that it was all just this kind of like meditative process or something, which is completely different from the story he had said, on Gaia TV or in Cosmic Secret and Bub Majestic, these documentaries that he and David Wilcock made. And his whole story with the 20 and back is that he would go into space, fight aliens, carry out missions, kind of like Buck Roger-esque, and he would come back to Earth. The missions he would fight and explore in space would be 20 years in length, and then he would come back and be age regressed somehow, either through technology or something. It was very nebulous, and be brought back to a younger version of himself to live out this life that he's currently living now on Earth. And because I had known that story was a completely debunkable thing, and Jason had brought up some kind of like credibility to that, I was really worried about Jason's overall credibility. And, I questioned if he was saying this is true, but I think you can speak to this now after we've discussed this. You have like more of a firm stance on that, right?
Yeah, because I think all I knew really was that I thought that 20 and back was just something I heard in the UAP community. And it sounded to me like they were talking about some kind of a mercenary program. And so I just thought that, that was a common term enough to where I could just, when they asked me if I was in 20 and back, I was like, I did some mercenary work. But I later on in that same interview, I actually said we didn't call it 20 and back. I was actually on what was called a termination team.
Okay.
And I never, all the stuff you said about time travel and all this other stuff, no, I've never said I've done any of that. So any of that happening, I would say would be, something that I would be concerned about as well.
Okay. So you're kind of like divorcing yourself from that association.
Yeah, I just didn't know what the term meant, 20 and back. I thought it meant mercenary work. And I was asked a question early on when I came out, I think it was the first space I actually did. So I just was misinformed of myself. And then when I found out later on, I was like, oh yeah, I kind of screwed up. I should have known better to say, allow them to think that it was 20 and back. Because I am certainly glad though that later on I clarified that what I was involved with was not called 20 and back.
Right.
So I'm glad I at least said that later on in the same space.
So you, if you don't mind me asking
another
question.
No.
Yeah, cool.
This is good.
You basically, like at first you had told James Fox about your experience with the Nellis Air Force Base test range UFO, right?
Yeah.
And the blue being like blue tinged skin.
It was more an albino that looked like he was hypothermic, just like people get that cold and they get bluish on their skin tone.
Okay. And so he wasn't aware till later on, like after the program came out, about the sort of like hit squad sort of mercenary work that you had done?
Yeah, because up until that point, it really wasn't moot for either his film or what we were doing initially, which was he was just, recording me for a deathbed confession. Like if something happened to me, that at least I had a documentation of my story.
Right.
And it just never came up that, 20 and back or mercenary work or any of this other tertiary stuff that really wasn't part of his film. I just didn't think it was appropriate for. So I never told him about it until after the fact.
Right.
When I got questioned again about this. So.
Does this come up as like memories, basically, like sort of like spotty memories about the work you had to do that they kind of like held your family hostage?
Well, they didn't hold my family hostage. It was just me that they were concerned with. But yeah, it was just mainly me. And it's just broken memories. Yes, it's very much so that they've done something to try to mask the actual things that they do to you in the program. And there's been, a lot of other people have made the same claims. And I would say, yeah, I've probably been drugged or done something to me that made me forget. But yeah, it does come back. Only certain things about the memory, and then it all comes back as flashes sometimes, just like, when you have repressed memory, like you've been through a war. Like my dad used to get the same thing in Vietnam when he had PTSD. Certain things would trigger him, and the next thing you knew, he'd be messed up for a while.
Okay.
Someone in chat. Thank you, everyone, for being here in chat. I appreciate it. And a question came up. What part of Dreamland, though? Nellis bombing range, Nevada test, and training range, or the Tonopah test range?
I used to work both Talicha Peak area and the Black Mountain area. We used to do the jamming for the air crews that would come and train on the test range from all around the world. But while I was in the program, I actually was taken into Groom Lake area in Dreamland. So I've been at the Groom Lake where the airfield is that people have seen in the public domain. They have photographs that people took from other mountain ranges nearby with telescope lenses and things.
And has anyone ever got an image of that area that I know they're not supposed to, but
yeah, I can vouch for the fact that some of the people that did take those videos, that's what it looks like. They've built on it since I was there in the 90s. There are new buildings that have popped up that are in the more current photos.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And go ahead, Darcy.
I just got to pull up some questions from friends on Twitter that I wanted to ask. Yeah.
So anyone that is listening live here, if you are going to post a question, please do so in caps and the chat, and I'll try to get to them if it works with the conversation. And the old saying, extraordinary claims need extraordinary, evidence.
Yeah.
And that's coined by Carl Sagan, but it's an 18th century saying that's been just changed a bunch of times. He modernized it, but it's very quickly we understand what the thing is. How can you give? I mean, the evidence is tough. Now you were a whistleblower. I mean, you actually went and spoke with someone. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, just for the euphemism of that extraordinary claims, extraordinary evidence, I'd actually add to that. Also requires extraordinary investigation as well. And that's why I went to Capitol Hill to give testimony, also to give them the information about locations, programs that were running that I thought they needed to look into. Because to me, outside of any kind of fraud, waste, and abuse, this is a program that's been running for over 80 years now. And it's never had an honest review, a congressional review, as far as I know. And I thought, that was one of the things I wanted to bring up. I did bring it up when I was on the House and the Senate side, and told them that, it's been a long time. Isn't it about time for a full assessment? And you guys need to actually go to the location and look up what I say. And the other 40 whistleblowers that seem to have the same concerns I do, you guys need to go and do this. So that's what I would add, is that there needs to be extraordinary investigation, because this is all unprecedented. It's been under wraps for a very long time. It's quite possible that some of the leadership has made some bad decisions that they might not be wanting to let the public know about. I've also heard from other whistleblowers that there might have been some harms done to other people. And that was another concern, because to me, I think it's unconscionable that any American citizen would have to be harmed, or in some cases, what I heard was some of them got murdered. So that was kind of one of all those concerns were part of the reason I came forward.
Actually, just dovetailing off of that information, Disclosure Party asks, how many other whistleblowers have been threatened that you are aware of, and have they all gone to Congress recently or followed up?
I would say that around the same time I was there at Congress, talking to David Grush, there were at least 40 or more other individuals that I knew had come forward. Of those 40 or some odd, I only know about a handful personally, and I helped them to come forward as well. So that being taken into context, you've got a cadre of people now that are all, highly credentialed. Most of us have polygraphs, and numerous over the years polygraphs. So it's not like you can fake it 1 year and get by the rest of your career. You have to do this constantly.
Yeah.
So I find it quite striking that if there's that many of us coming forward, and we've got the credentials to say that, yeah, we've kept our mouth shut for long enough, but now we're all coming forward kind of at the same time, which is, to answer your question, yes, it's about the same time that I came forward. And it's like, how many witnesses do you need to get the circumstantial evidence to get the investigation going and actually, knock on people's doors, go to location and demand, show us what you have, and try to get everything on paper and get it reviewed.
How many people were threatened out of that group?
Well, that was the other part of your question. I know of only about 5 or so, because I know Lou, I know David. They've suffered. I've suffered. I know of a couple other people that are very scared and have had reprisals on the job because they tried to get out because they didn't, for one reason or another. They didn't like what they were seeing, and there's been at least 5 to 10 people that I know of that have been threatened. Excuse me.
Damn. Okay. How have you been threatened? Like, what happened in your case?
Well, I've had my car broken into. I know I've been watched. There's been a couple of times that I thought I might have been stalked a little bit. I'm having, for the first time in my entire career, I'm having trouble getting my clearance passed to the corporations that want to hire me. And I can't explain that. I've had a number of people that have tried to look into it and they can't seem to figure out why, because there's no derogatory notes, there's no investigation on me. And yet my clearance that has been passed down for probably about 20 to 30 years of my contracting career without any bumps. It's just been, because you're supposed to keep your clearance in your company, and then if you change jobs, your old company kind of retains it, and then they pass it on when you're ready. But this last time, after I became a whistleblower, now all of a sudden it's not being passed anymore.
That's weird.
Right. So I'm hoping everything's okay, but I have to be a little suspect about it.
Yeah, because it's taken time.
Right. It's never happened to me before.
What's up?
Yeah, there's a question in here in chat, unless you have a follow-up.
Yeah, I've got another question, but you go.
Okay, this is someone here in line that has this question. Wouldn't they purposely not store anything anomalous at a federal facility due to the fact that it would be subject to FOIA and regulations? That's a good question.
You mean like an archive of what they have?
No, she, I do believe, is talking about
Craft.
Oh, most of the craft, from what I understood, was kept in either underground facilities or in hangars that were in very hard to get to places like at Groom Lake.
But they're still under federal, though. It's still under government owned.
They might be involved, but they don't. When you're talking about waivered programs, there's no congressional oversight. Therefore, there's no federal involvement. There's very little oversight on any of that. So that's why they were getting away with this.
I heard that you had an experience possibly entering a base at Site 2.
Oh, yeah, Site 2 was another place that I had to go to when I got kicked out of the program. You're right. But yeah, I had to go there, and that was that was when the dirty work had to start. And that's why I had to do some of that,
How deep does that structure go?
Well, all I knew was at the back end of this hallway that they took me down, there was a freight elevator, and it looked like it was pretty deep, at least to 5 to 10 stories. So I don't know exactly myself, but I'd say it was quite deep.
Okay. Have you, Mr. Sands, this is a question from Red Octopus on Twitter,
Hey, Red.
ever heard of a sentient program at NRO and Space Force? My files show multiple NRO classified documents of the sentient program tracking Tic Tac UAP in 2021, as well as other shaped UAP before 21. When David Grush was at NRO Space Force, can you elaborate any further?
I'd say that yes, NRO is a big partner in the program, along with a lot of other interagency partners. CIA's got a little piece of this that you got, well, actually a major piece of this, DIA, FBI even, and NRO. Definitely all of these, because you're thinking if you're going to be tracking things coming from space, you've got to have satellites involved. You've got to have telescopes involved. So you're talking about very unique facilities, very unique equipment and systems that have to be used to be part of this program. So it's kind of scattered everywhere because you can't find these just in like a street corner. These are like one-off labs that can do just one thing. So yeah, I'd say that to answer his question, yes, I would suspect that NRO has a piece of this, and they're probably helping with parts of the detection and sensing of these anomalous craft.
Okay, the cat from also Twitter says, is there a part of the phenomenon that is deemed hostile? And if so, what is? Like, is there a species?
Yeah. I think when I was on Joe Rogan, I alluded to that, the fact that whenever the reptilians were mentioned, it was hushed up very quickly. And the attitude that I heard from the people discussing the reptilians, it was like a taboo subject for some reason. Now, whether that's because they are considered dangerous or whether they're doing something even more secretive here on our planet or in our government, even spaces in our government, because I've heard that they maybe have an ability to cloak what they look like, and they suspect they're even walking among us, and that's what I've heard and read about since the program days. But I had very little information to go on because these people, when I was there, would just tell each other, "Shut up! We don't want to go there. Don't talk about reptilians on any of the phones or telecommunications."
So, when you were dispatched to like whack these crab aliens in that cave, were they like something that I guess was on the radar of these people within the military that are looking at a hostile entity? Do you know if they were good or bad, or you just don't know when you were like, I was just doing my job?
Well, it's hard to discuss it because most people are kind of on the fence about whether they even want to believe in this phenomenon. Mm-hmm. So what you're talking about is kind of what Jake Barber, myself, and several others have already alluded to, is that there's some very risky stuff that goes on with these retrievals. I think Jake Barber did a good job of describing that, there's been gunfire and people dying to recover some of these craft because it's very valuable material. Mm-hmm. Both the biologics and the craft itself are very valuable to be selling and to be working with, because imagine the kind of exotic tech that if you grab that and you can actually do something with it, that's very valuable for them. So that leads to a lot of competition. So like you could have like one private company and another private company. And they may not even all be from America. You might even have Russians involved from other companies that come and try to retrieve these craft, and there's clashes. So also you can imagine going beyond that in the NHI realms, they probably have their own problem children also. And sometimes there are fugitives that may actually be here on our Earth. And that's what I feel I was part of, that I literally had to pay my penance to get kicked out of the Air Force to do that stuff.
Okay.
Here's another question, and I have to thank Medinopoulos for these wonderful questions. They're very good. I hope you visit a number of my shows coming up. Okay, her question is: couldn't what you heard across multiple facilities was personnel using cover narratives as counter-espionage because of the Russia's pervasiveness and intel gathering?
That's a constant thing for us in any of these clandestine programs, is that our enemies might find something out. However, in this case, I would say that there's more of a need for some of the other riskiness, that where people's lives are in danger. I think that outweighs a lot of the checks and balances, and that's what I really want an assessment for, to take care of that. Now, I don't know if that's enough to answer Kat's question, but what else within that question? I couldn't quite remember everything.
Well, you basically answered the question was like a cover, so to avoid Russian
Well,
gathering.
there are code words for things, but like words like tall whites, grays are not code words. That's not. They serve no purpose.
Yeah.
They don't follow the usual code word conventions. Therefore, when I would hear those words, I knew there. And on top of that, there's certain context in the conversations themselves that didn't lend to the fact that these were code words that need to be bothered. I need to be bothered with. These were actually, they were talking about different species of beings or entities, not groups of this, that, or the other.
And the next question, the same person asking, did you have a Q clearance with restricted data access?
Yes, I had above that actually.
Mm-hmm. But it's with restricted data access. Is that so things can be compartmentalized more? Is that
correct?
And
well, I wasn't restricted because of the nature of my job in the program. There's different levels of what you get read into. I have to kind of describe this a little, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But the way it goes is you have an umbrella program, usually at the leadership level, where they have a general knowledge about which organizations are involved and what their mission might be. But unless they actually go to the facilities, they may not see the detail of everyday work. So underneath that umbrella, they have a bunch of other breakout programs that are likewise kept clandestine. And that's where the detail work is taking place. And that's where the scientists are actually given, like, here, figure out how this works, and then get back to us. And, they have their way of going and trying to break it down. But that's how it kind of works. So the people at the top don't know what's going on at the bottom all the time, nor does the people at the bottom know what's actually, who all is involved. Now, because of the nature of my work, I was in, the telecommunications monitoring. I never got a read in, even though I went to a bunch of different locations. So at my level, I didn't have to get the read in. So I imagine what it was I was given that umbrella type level. But because of the nature of my job, I'm listening to each site where the scientists are talking, the engineers are talking, and the directors are talking. So I'm actually hearing all the detail. When I get to that location to monitor the telecommunications, I actually hear what's going on daily. So I had a unique position with the other three analysts where we actually knew the overall and we knew the detail, which is very unique, because usually if you're bred into at one of these lower echelons, you were only given that one piece of the program to work. You weren't allowed to talk to the guy next door. You couldn't go across the hall. You just worked in your piece of it. And that's it. That's all they knew. Whereas me, I had to know what everybody was doing and figure it out.
Okay, here's a question I'd like to ask you, because I bring it up all the time on my show when I'm asked if, the U.S. government will ever come out with, what is exactly going on. And my thoughts, it's just my thoughts and my theory. My theory has been all along that the government doesn't know entirely what's going on.
Correct.
Oh, you agree with that already? Okay. Let me just, and my thought is, and that's why there's no race for any type of disclosure, because they can't give us the whole picture, even if they wanted to. And when you can't give someone the whole picture, that also leaves room for possible benevolent, what am I thinking of? Yeah, danger.
Correct.
They're going to eat us. So, yeah. So go ahead.
Well, and that's great. Everything you just asked is exactly the way I would say that it is. The environment is tough for the Congress committee members. I'm glad that we have the administration now that we have that are going to delve into this more. But when I was up talking at Capitol Hill with the committee members, they said, well, what program is this? And I looked at the guy who brought me in, and I said, is it okay if I tell them what the program name is? And he said, yes, go ahead. And I told them what the program name was. And they all looked at each other and they were like, we don't know what that program is. And I was kind of horrified at that point, because I'm like, good grief.
They're completely uneducated.
Well, they just are not informed on this particular program. They knew what every other thing, every other SAP program was about.
Oh.
But I gave them this one program name and they were like, wow. And that wasn't just at Congress. Even when I gave my ICIG testimony and filled out, my IG complaint, they likewise, they even said before, oh, we're read into everything. And then I told them what the program names. And again, they said, we don't know what that is.
Right.
And they actually had somebody leave the room where I was being interviewed to look it up in their database. And they came back and said, we can't find it.
Okay.
So it's one of those things where I think it may have either changed names, which I did find out later, that yes, it did change names. And I think that we need to keep looking around in the archives, and that's something I'd like to help out with, because I do think I could help out with some of that research for the Congress and where they need to look for the information.
Do you think in the next, this is a question from somebody else, out of all the claims that you've made, do you think there's going to be anything tangible that's going to come forward in the next 12 months to prove them?
Certainly. Yep.
You think so?
Yeah, I think they've done a really good job, I think, in this particular administration right now, that they actually have an effort for declassification, which is part of the problem. Because when you are talking about some of these programs that are highly clandestine, sometimes they go into what's called a bigoted status.
Mm-hmm.
And bigoting, what you're saying is that usually there's a moratorium after 50 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're supposed to, like the CIA documents that we had, dumped into the public spaces some years ago. That's kind of what should happen all the time. However, with this program, they bigoted it, and that will never happen unless they choose to do so. So my hope is that I'm not being adversarial. We're not living back in the days of Russia and post-World War II era anymore. And I just think the culture has been so isolated.
Yeah, Russia's our friends now, right?
But no, I mean, it's not the same as that. But this is one of the things where the culture was built in that era of McCarthyism. And, even the public were pointing fingers at each other about, are you a communist? That part of it's not there anymore, that stigma. But I think we can move forward now. We're in a different age where I think there's a little bit of a win-win for, doing this stuff to declassify at least the fact that we're not alone. That's, as far as I know, they never said it was a classified issue whenever I reported things, because I had to mark all of my reports. And I had to know what classification level this was or that was that I was reporting on. Mm-hmm. And never was I told that being that we're one of other civilizations that exist was never a classified thing. Mm-hmm. And the weapon systems certainly were, and the scientific discoveries, those were certainly classified. But just the thought that we're not alone, that's never been at all. I mean, that's like a God-given right, I think, for people to decide for themselves. Mm-hmm. But to know bona fidely that our government knows that these people exist, or these other peoples exist, that's what we need to get to. Is because I think if they could just come clean on that one issue, they'd get a big monkey off their back. The public would finally say, okay, finally, we know we're not alone. We get the national security issues with the weapon systems. We don't want to know that. But all they want to know, are we alone, mm-hmm. or not? If they could just come clean on that, then you could get away. You can get rid of all the deception. You can get rid of all the having to lie about it, and everybody would be happier, because then they'll be left alone. Yeah, to do the job. And I think that's where I'm headed, and that's why I've said I've tried not to be adversarial. I'm trying to find a common ground, and that's what I've told Congress, and I think that's a good common ground for everybody to come to.
Ben Hansen, I don't know if you know who he is. He's someone that's been involved in the UFO field for a long time. He's former FBI. He's a Fed. His grandfather, well, for one thing, he was always gone when, gone, and you could not get in touch with him when he was gone. And we think it was retrievals, maybe, or something like that. But anyway, and Ben Hansen did some investigations. Some things lined up with events when he was gone. Right. So, but his deathbed, holding his son's hand, Ben Hansen's father's hand, he said, "I just have one thing to tell you: we're not alone." And that was back, many years ago. Mm-hmm. And so, there's a lot of people that have probably gone to their grave, knowing that we're not alone. And it's just a very simple question. And I think that statistically, any astronomer or astrophysicist, they're all going to say, life fights to be here in the depths of the, wherever in
the ocean, ground, and extremophiles and stuff like that. Yeah,
it's got to be life. But so another question that Menopoulos, I can't pronounce her name, said, why did Jake Barber, now I don't know this to be a fact, but why did Jake Barber lie about his DD-214?
That I don't know. I haven't talked to him since I met him in 2003, or 23 rather.
2023?
23, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I actually met him before he became a whistleblower, but I haven't asked him about that.
Yeah.
And I don't want to, I'm one of those people that, you guys, I want to check my facts before I say something that I shouldn't. But I would say that as far as I know, Jake's been a very stand-up guy. I know that sometimes certain things can be documented and certain things can't be documented. It's like you can go in my records, like at Nellis, and it says in my personnel reports for every year that I was in that program, I've got 3 years of stating that all I could say was I was handpicked for Secretary of the Air Force Special Access Program.
Okay.
And that's all I could say. And maybe Jake's under the same onus in that he couldn't put certain things on his records because he was doing a different job that required it.
There was a question that was sent to me via Facebook Messenger. Somebody that said that they had heard a rumor that maybe your unit wasn't actually active at Nellis Air Force Base at the time that you say you were there, and that it ended around like 1989 or something like that.
No. We were always a detachment of the 68th Intel wing in Texas.
Okay.
So that's why the lineage is hard to track when you're doing that. And it
Because maybe one time the unit was on the base, and then you're saying it was detached.
Yeah, it's a detachment. But even in the detachment there, the main mission for that detachment is just to do the red flag exercises to train the air crews for wartime, and to do normal everyday types of telecommunication assessment. There are only 4 of us out of 200 people in my career field that were read into that one program that I was in, and nobody knew that existed. Even my coworkers didn't know where I went sometimes. And we actually had 2 officers, my commander and a captain, that were actually flying cover for us, that every time we went on a mission, if somebody asked a question, where'd Jay go? He'd have to say, he's working for me, leave him alone. He'll be back in a week, or a week or 2. And that's what they would do. And that's all anybody ever knew, was that we had certain missions that we did for this captain and the commander. That's about all you'd ever find out, even if you asked for that.
Yeah.
Because we would just disappear, and that would be it. But nobody would miss us, because we already tried to fit our missions in amongst all the other mundane kind of routine missions, and we did a really good job of covering it up.
Yeah. Did you interview for Age of Disclosure?
No.
Okay. I was just curious because I heard while I was here that like Logan Lenvell, John Ramirez, and one other person, their pieces were cut.
John
Blitch.
Yep.
Were left on the cutting room floor of Age of Disclosure. Do you know why, or have you ever heard?
I wouldn't know why. And I'd rather talk to John and the other folks and Blitch and Blick and everybody
else. I talked
else.
to John Ramirez about it. Yeah. I think it basically had to do with they were trying to follow one narrative, and those things didn't. They
wanted to focus on the UFOs.
Yeah, one type of narrative, and it wasn't fitting in smoothly with the rest. But so I had a question for you, but I got distracted with that. But so I'm going back to Mendonopoulos, who has all these great questions. I should see if she wants to be a co-host. She's so good. Yeah. Was it possible that they were testing his team's readiness levels by injecting false information and testing the reflections in his report, in your reporting?
I would say I've been asked a number of times if that's something that's viable. Is that were they pulling a scam on me?
Like a psyop.
Yeah, trying to psyop me, but it doesn't make sense because it took they spent literally hundreds of thousands in training on me, and I could only spend 2 weeks at these mission sites, and the customers definitely want you to find the security vulnerability, so they don't give you fake numbers. And to generate all the different voices, male, female, that were talking all the time, all the office symbols, and faking all of that just to fake me out. and all of my other team members would be a complete waste of all the money and the tens of thousands of dollars every time we had to move out.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense to me that's why would you have to indoctrinate me, give me a polygraph, do the job, and then just do it all for fake? It just doesn't make sense. It's kind of like, somebody being hired for Walmart to be the bagger and then, hide the bags on them, kind of like, why would you do that?
Yeah. So
It would suck.
back when I remember I was in touch with, I was talking like every so often to James Fox, and I just happened to be talking to him when he accidentally put your name on the storyboard was in a shot and your name was revealed.
Yeah.
So you were going to be anonymous.
I was.
And do you have any regrets about coming out with
It was stressful at first, you're right. And actually the first time I went public on X was because I actually was under stress. I actually had been through a lot of stuff that was already going on with me and my wife because we're separated and everything, and also other things that were going on in my life at that time. But I think I just was at a moment of weakness but yeah, that didn't help because, when James had my name on the clapperboard, people started looking for who I was, and I had to talk to my bosses. And that was not fun, by the way. But they supported me 110%. I'm so proud that, I worked for the company that I did, and the folks at NSA and Cybercom were both very supportive when that came out. So it ended up turning out to be a blessing, even though it was a bit stressful at first.
Now, is there another side to that? I look at what happened to David Grush. He came out, and then this dirt came out about him, to hurt his credibility. And I'm wondering, have you feared that might happen?
It already has. I mean, I've taken my heat, but I think it takes pretty well.
The Ken Klappenstein
That's right.
article or whatever.
I'm glad you remembered his name.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sometimes I remember things properly.
That's right.
Yeah, and I have talked to David about the Klippenstein stuff because I think when Doge went after things, I actually found a couple of receipts that he got paid around the same time that story when Grush came out.
Through USA?
Through something that they found. There was a receipt that actually had it there.
Wow.
And so, yeah, we talked a little bit about that. So there might be something coming out with that.
Yeah. I know there was something.
But anyway, I think people came to Grush's defense, though.
Of course.
I mean, who's going to beat up on a guy who's been through, the worst of the worst and, had to actually go and commit to going to
therapy,
a place in therapy. And then you're like, come on, people, back off.
Yeah, no, we all have, life is hard, and we all have, something. And, when they can't pick apart the evidence, they pick on the person.
Exactly. And that's what I felt it was, is because they couldn't get him any other way.
Yeah.
So they tried to just, kind of just, well, you're a dirtbag, and that's the best. They just keep throwing dirt and sticks. And it's kind of like, come on, stop it. I mean, it's one thing to disagree with the guy and just say you don't agree with him, but to get ugly like that, it's just uncalled for. It's totally stupid.
Yeah. Here's another question by Mendonopoulos. Why didn't your officer in charge ever disclose the ground truth explanation of the EEFI?
Oh, the EFIs?
Yeah.
What are those?
I have no idea.
Essential elements of friendly information.
Oh, wow. This person's pretty knowledgeable. That's
Yeah,
these questions.
he knows what those are, but EFIs are just part of the reporting process. But when we wrote reports for the program, they were kept in a separate safe from all the rest of the program, all the other telecommunications of the routine missions that we ran. Some of them would run up to top secret level sometimes, but the stuff that we were recording for the program and kept in the safes, that stuff went to another level. So, and on top of that, the copies that we had, they'd actually be forwarded, I think, to the clientele or the directors or whoever we were working for. They have a copy, and then they could disseminate it to their staff as needed to fix the security problems we found. And then I think another copy would go to the Secretary Air Force Archive or the DoD Archive.
Very interesting. If you think what
That's
it takes to get here, and why are they so many?
I could answer, I think, at least when in the Roswell days. I know that radar, I think, was blamed for the downing of the craft that happened at Roswell, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was just right there near the end of World War II that radar actually became a technology we utilized. So they may have been visiting us all those years before that technology, and then all of a sudden they're hit with this, and somehow it causes their craft to malfunction.
Right.
So at least at that time frame, I would say that technology was probably not encountered by them until that time frame, and that might have been the reason for that particular crash. Now, other crashes might be similar situation, and just like we have machines that we think are going to run perfectly. I mean, I'd love to have my car run perfectly all the days of my life, but it doesn't.
Sometimes things happen.
Exactly, and I think that's what happens with them sometimes.
Okay.
We have another question from this wonderful question asker. Was the program name Jason gave to Congress either Zenith or Capstone?
No.
Oh, okay. You're probably not able to give that name.
No, I cannot. No.
How often do you talk to David Grush?
Quite often, more last year than this year.
Like just like leading up to the Fox film releasing, you were more in communication?
Yeah, I was in communique with him almost on a weekly basis.
Okay.
Yeah, because we were always talking about this or that or the other thing. And but right now we're kind of on different paths because, I went public the way I did it. And he's part of more of the planned disclosure than I am right now because, I feel confident in what he's doing.
Yeah.
And I thought the only thing I could really add to this, by me going public the year after he went public was just to try a different tact and to go to the people, because I always heard from Congress, from them, they're like, the public really needs to light a fire because then we can get behind this, and other, Congress people will start to get behind this.
Yeah, I admonish you for bringing attention to this subject, even though it's your way and it's your story, which some people have found controversial. I think we all want in the end the same thing, which is disclosure, that we're not alone, that something is here that's non-human, possibly UFOs are not all ours, that type of thing. So I appreciate that about you.
Right.
And, people can get things twisted, but that's just the straight facts. We got 3 minutes. I guess another thing I could say is, so if there is a plan for in the next few months, Lou and Grush to literally be part of Luna Paulina and, Tim Burchett's team to, interface with congressional members and really do more skiffs and read people into this subject in a greater way than ever before. Are you going to try and be part of that circle?
If they ask, I'm certainly here for that. I've always had 110% I support everything David does, Lou does, the whole effort to get to disclosure. I will help with whatever I can. And I'm also, going to kind of do things that I think might help as well to help instigate a more motivation for Congress to get involved in this. But yeah, I'm fully behind everything they're doing.
Okay.
Fully behind it.
Well, this has been a really interesting discussion. I think this is there was some parts I guess I had never heard of your story before. So, fascinating. Wow. Very good. So one last question someone had, and then we're going to have to wrap it. And that is, there's some type of sky watch I'm not familiar with tomorrow night. Are you familiar with what that is?
I haven't been keeping up with it. I know that's Jake Barber's thing. Is that he's
I see.
Skywatch.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what are you looking for 2025?
What I'm looking for is them finally, Luna's team and Burchett, Grush, helping them to go in and find the archives to get the documentation they need to prove, that this program exists, first of all, and then what have they been doing with this? What parts have been covered up? What parts do they need to go and actually go to the site and investigate? That's what I'm hoping to start seeing come out the gate, is that we're finally getting some progress made on the investigation part. Because like I said, you can't just have extraordinary evidence, especially if the evidence is held under wraps at gunpoint at these facilities, you're going to have to go in there also with authority to get them to stand down long enough to go and do your assessment.
Cool.
Thanks so much, guys. This has been a real pleasure. And we'll be back next week with G.O. Turner, and that'll be on our regular night, Tuesday. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.